All right, so are you ready to dive deep into some French grammar?
I am indeed.
Today we're going to be tackling a topic that I think is absolutely fascinating, and that is the world of French euphemisms and polite language.
Ooh la la.
So you know you're prepping for that pronunciator certificate, right?
Hey,
This is really going to help you with that.
it is.
But you know what? It's not just about memorizing phrases for a test.
No.
It's really about understanding the deeper cultural values that are expressed through these polite ways of speaking.
Yeah, and I think the pronunciator material really digs into that, which is quite cool.
It does, and I think it's fun to explore the why behind the words, right?
Absolutely.
Like, why do the French use certain expressions?
Yeah.
And how does that reflect their worldview?
Yeah.
So let's just jump right into it.
Okay.
One thing that really stood out to me from these pronunciator materials was how the French use euphemisms to navigate, some of those potentially awkward situations.
Yeah.
Like, how do you say no without actually saying no?
Well, that's a good question.
Yo.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because French culture places such a high value on tact
Yeah.
and avoiding confrontation.
Right.
So you, instead of just a flat out no, you might hear something like, Je suis désolé, mais je suis pris ce jour-là, which means, I'm sorry, but I'm busy that day.
So it's like you're implying the no without actually saying it.
Yeah, softening the blow.
Yeah, it's very subtle.
It is.
But I can see how it would be useful in so many situations, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What about asking someone's age, which can be a bit sensitive in many cultures?
Oh, yeah.
How would a French speaker approach that topic delicately without being too blunt?
Well, asking someone's age directly, that's considered a little intrusive in French culture.
Interesting.
It goes back to respecting privacy and avoiding anything that could potentially embarrass the person,
Yeah.
So rather than just, like you said, bluntly asking, you might phrase it more like, Quel âge avez-vous environ? Which means, approximately, how old are you?
Okay, so the environ there is adding that layer of softness.
Yeah.
It's like acknowledging that age is a personal matter.
Exactly.
And you're respecting their boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious, wouldn't it just be simpler to be direct?
Well,
Some situations.
I mean, directness might be valued in some cultures.
Sure.
But, the French, they really prioritize preserving social harmony and avoiding that potential for discomfort.
So they would say it's more important to maintain those smooth relationships
Absolutely.
than to just be completely blunt about everything.
It's all about that kind of seamless
I can see that.
social interaction.
Yeah, and it's not just about the words themselves, but the underlying values, right?
Exactly.
It reflects their worldview.
Mm-hmm.
So we've seen how euphemisms can be used for sensitive topics.
Yeah.
But what about everyday interactions? Like, how do you give feedback
Right.
or express appreciation in a way that's both honest but also polite?
Well, there are some clever techniques that the French use for that too.
Listen.
So, for example, when you're giving feedback, they often soften the impact of criticism by using bien and mal.
Ah.
So instead of just bluntly saying c'est mauvais,
Which
means that's bad,
right.
you could say c'est pas très bien.
Okay, so it's a subtle difference, but
It's more like
you're acknowledging their effort while still kind of pointing out areas for improvement.
Exactly. It's like that bad, but it could be better.
Right. It's not terrible, but it could use some work.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the flip side, when expressing gratitude,
Right.
it's not always just about a simple merci, right?
Yeah, not at all.
The French language offers this whole array of expressions
Absolutely.
that can convey different shades of appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I like that.
So for instance, you could say c'est très gentil de votre part, which means that's very kind of you.
Okay.
It just expresses a deeper level of gratitude.
Yeah. Yeah, it's more than just thanks.
Yeah, it's more than just a simple merci.
It's like you really appreciate what they did.
Exactly. It's acknowledging the thoughtfulness behind their action.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It is, and it's one that I use all the time.
I can see myself using that after someone does me a favor
Yes.
or goes out of the way to help me.
Exactly.
What about if you want to express even stronger appreciation? Is there a more formal way to say thank you?
Absolutely.
Right,
In a more formal setting, or when you're feeling genuinely indebted to someone, you might use Je vous suis très reconnaissant.
And that means?
Which means I am very grateful to you.
Okay, so that conveys a very sincere
It does.
sense of obligation and appreciation.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much depth there is in the French language.
It is.
When it comes to expressing gratitude, it's
Yeah.
like each phrase carries a slightly different emotional weight.
It does. Yeah, it really shows you have to think about the right words in the right situation.
It does. And sometimes, you need to say no.
Right.
Or you need to ask for something
Yeah.
without, sounding too demanding or
Yeah.
stepping on anyone's toes.
Right.
Speaking of which, I've always been a little confused about s'il te plaît and s'il vous plaît. I know they both mean please, but when do you use which one?
Yeah, it's all about formality.
Okay.
So s'il te plaît is the informal.
Okay.
With people you're close to, friends, family.
Right.
Maybe close colleagues in a really relaxed setting.
Gotcha.
But s'il vous plaît is the formal one.
Okay.
Someone older, someone in a position of authority.
So it's like choosing between you and you guys in English.
It is, yeah.
It's like you're showing that level of respect.
Yeah,
It's interesting how these little things can make a big difference.
they do.
Are there any other common pitfalls that we should watch out for
Oh, yeah, there are a few.
when you're trying to be polite in French?
So let's say you need to leave a gathering early. And you don't want to just say je m'en vais, which is just I'm leaving.
Right, which sounds kind of abrupt.
A little abrupt, yeah. So you could say something like, je dois rentrer tôt ce soir. I have to go home early tonight.
So you're offering an excuse.
You're softening the blow.
So that it doesn't sound like you're just ditching them out of boredom.
Exactly.
It's kind of like, I have this prior engagement.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of something else I've always wondered about.
Yeah.
How do you make suggestions in French without sounding bossy?
Well, one strategy is to use the verb devoir,
Okay,
which implies a suggestion rather than a command.
gotcha.
So instead of saying, va à ce restaurant, which is go to this restaurant,
Right.
you could say, tu devrais essayer ce restaurant, like you should try this restaurant.
It's amazing how, a little tweak in the wording
I know.
can make such a big difference
Yeah.
in the tone.
Totally.
It's like, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying,
A suggestion.
this is a good idea,
Yeah.
but it's your choice.
It's fast land. And it reminds me, we can't forget about the French love for indirect language.
Tell me about it.
They love to express things subtly through hints and suggestions.
It can be a little confusing
It can be.
for someone learning the language, right?
Yeah.
It's like they're masters of saying things without actually saying them.
Right.
But how do you even begin to decipher those subtle cues?
Well, it takes practice and immersion, but I think one key is to understand the role of the subjunctive mood,
The subjunctive.
which I know is a bit of a,
It can be tricky.
it can be tricky, but the subjunctive is often used to express, wishes, desires,
Yeah.
suggestions, or doubts, and it plays a big role in polite communication.
I remember struggling with the subjunctive when I first started learning French.
Yeah.
It seemed so complex, so many different forms to remember.
I know, it can be a little overwhelming at first.
Can you give us a simple breakdown of how it's used in polite speech?
Of course. So imagine you want to ask a friend for a favor. Okay.
Instead of saying, peux-tu me prêter ta voiture? Which is, can you lend me your car?
Yeah.
Which is quite direct. You could say, je voudrais que tu me prêtes ta voiture. Which is, I would like you to lend me your car.
Okay.
So you're using that subjunctive mood.
So it's like, again, you're acknowledging that you're asking a favor.
Exactly.
It's not a demand.
And you're not putting them on the spot.
Right. Like they could easily say no and it wouldn't be rude.
Exactly, because you phrased it so politely.
It's almost like you're giving them an out
You are.
if it's not convenient.
Yes.
And isn't there another type of subjunctive too?
Yeah, there's the imparfait subjunctive, which is often used in more formal situations
Okay.
or to express hypothetical situations politely.
Oh, yeah. Even more nuanced.
Yeah, and, the subjunctive can be a bit of a beast.
Yeah.
But understanding the basics of it, I think, is key.
I'm starting to realize that French grammar isn't just about rules and structures. It's really a reflection of the culture itself. It is. It's a reflection of their values and their worldview.
Right, and their way of interacting with the world.
Mm-hmm.
And this brings us to another fascinating aspect of French politeness,
Which is
the use of tenses.
Tenses, yeah.
I never thought about tenses as being particularly polite or impolite,
Right.
but it turns out they can be.
Yeah, certain tenses can definitely soften the tone
Okay.
and make your speech sound more refined and polite.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Fill me in.
So for instance, the conditional tense,
Okay.
is often used to make requests less demanding
Okay.
and more like suggestions.
So it's like the difference between saying, like, can you do this?
Yeah.
Versus, would you mind doing this?
Exactly. It's adding that touch of consideration.
I see. And then there's that imparfait subjunctive again,
There it is, popping up again.
adding that extra layer of formality.
It likes to be formal.
So many nuances.
It's like each grammatical element in French has a role to play in conveying politeness.
It's truly an art form.
It is. It's a beautiful and subtle art form.
And speaking of art forms, we can't forget about the importance of saying goodbye with grace.
Oh, yes. The French farewell, a whole ritual in itself. Yeah, they really do have a special way of saying goodbye.
They do. I'm always impressed by how French speakers can just like transition so smoothly from a conversation to a goodbye.
I know, it's like an art.
It is so, what are some of those like graceful expressions that I can add to my repertoire?
Well, instead of just the simple au revoir, which can feel a bit plain, you could say bonne soirée,
Which means,
have a good evening.
okay, so it's like you're wishing them well.
You are. It adds a touch of warmth.
And I imagine bonne journée would work the same way.
Exactly. Wishing them a good day.
Right.
It's subtle, but it shows you care.
And for more casual settings, you could use au platard.
Yes. See you later.
Ah, yes, that's a classic.
It is. It's so versatile.
So friendly.
And then there's the ever-reliable salut,
Oh, salut.
which works beautifully in informal situations.
Yes, especially among friends.
Exactly.
It's like the perfect balance between casual and polite.
It is.
It seems like these little farewell rituals are an important part of French social etiquette.
They are. They really are.
This whole deep dive has been such a revelation.
I'm glad.
I feel like I've learned so much about French politeness and those cultural values that it reflects.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is, but we've covered so much ground.
We have.
Maybe you can just give us a quick recap of the key takeaways,
Of course.
especially for our listener who's, prepping for that pronunciator certificate.
Absolutely.
Like, what are the most important things to remember about euphemisms and polite language in French?
Well, first and foremost, remember that French culture places a high value on tact,
Right.
indirectness, and avoiding confrontation.
So it's all about being subtle
It is.
and preserving that social harmony.
Exactly.
And that's reflected in everything from how they use euphemisms
Yeah.
to how they phrase their requests
Mm-hmm.
and even how they say goodbye. And what about those key tools that we talked about?
Oh, yes. So using bien and mal to soften criticism.
Right.
Choosing the right level of formality with tu versus vous.
And don't forget those subtle ways of saying no
Oh, yes. Mastering the art of the implied no.
without actually saying the word no.
Exactly. It's a skill.
And of course, exploring all those wonderful expressions for gratitude.
Yes. Go beyond the simple merci. There's so much more you can say.
Right. And let's not forget about those grammatical gems like the subjunctive
Oh, yes. The subjunctive, our friend.
and the conditional tense.
Powerful tools for politeness.
It's like having a secret weapon
It is.
for navigating social situations with grace.
Exactly. And ultimately, polite language is about more than just rules and formulas.
Right.
It's about being mindful, showing empathy.
It's about connecting with people
It is.
on a human level.
Exactly.
This has been an incredible deep dive.
Thank you.
I feel like we've only scratched the surface of this fascinating topic,
There's always more to explore.
but I hope our listener feels inspired to keep learning
I hope so too.
and to discover even more about the beauty and subtlety of French euphemisms and polite language.
Absolutely. It's a journey worth taking.
Huge thank you to our expert for sharing their incredible insights with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And to our listener, best of luck on that pronunciator certificate journey.
You got this.
Keep practicing, keep exploring, and keep diving deep into the wonders of the French language.
Au revoir.
Until next time, au revoir.